my basic plan is to read some parables with you every day, and also to read through Benjamin's theses on the philosophy of history, which is actually oddly titled, since in the German it's on the concept of history. And I'll be using the German to illuminate certain passages or to help us solve some puzzles, but I don't expect that everybody has German, and those who do have German, correct me and help me. That would be great. I'm hoping that we will be able to read some of Benjamin's essays on Kafka, and also some of the correspondence between Adorno and Benjamin that pertains to Kafka. And I think, as you'll see as we read through these materials, that there are many questions that Kafka's writing poses to people who are trying to think in new ways about history. Kafka's not an historian. Kafka doesn't write tracts on history. He doesn't write a tract on the philosophy of history. He writes mainly fictional texts. He writes correspondence. Some of the fictional texts he writes are extremely abbreviated, and even the parables that we will be looking at here are for the most part extracted from his diaries, and in some cases his letters, and compiled posthumously as his parables. Okay, so Kafka never wrote a set of parables and sent them to a publisher, but those who edited his work posthumously collected the parables, mainly, not exclusively, from something called the Blue Octavo Notebook. And what you have before you, if you indeed have the parable form, the parables with you, as I hope you do, is an edited collection that Schocken Press undertook after his death. So if we could, I don't know what people actually have. I have a couple of extra copies of the parable called My Destination. Let's see if I have them here.
It's the last one on page 189.
If someone has an extra copy, I would like to have it.
Yeah, I'm checking.
I'll make more copies at lunchtime. I've noted that there's about 7 of you who need copies. There's
8.
So 8 now. Thank you.
Hold on 1 second. Okay. So this is a copy of My Destination, or Das Ziel. And this is a text that could, it has been translated differently. Das Ziel can be the goal. The goal, the purpose. Also, possibly destination. Destination, it carries in it, in English, destiny, which I think is not in Ziel. The German for destiny would be more likely Schicksal. So, but we'll let that, my destination stand, das Ziel. And let me read it. Let me read it for you first, although I'll be asking you to read some of these as time goes by. I gave orders for my horse to be brought round from the stable. The servant did not understand me. I myself went to the stable, saddled my horse, and mounted. In the distance I heard a bugle call. I asked him what this meant. He knew nothing and had heard nothing. At the gate he stopped me, asking, "Where are you riding to, master?" "I don't know," I said, "only away from here, away from here. Always away from here, only by doing so can I reach my destination." "And so you know your destination?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "Didn't I say so? Away from here, that is my destination." "You have no provisions with you," he said. "I need none," I said. "The journey is so long that I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. No provisions can save me, for it is fortunately a truly immense journey." Okay. Not simple, but not impossible either. It starts, as you can see, with an I, with a first person who reports having given an order in the past. So he's narrating a story, but he's narrating a story about having given an order. He gave the order for his horse to be brought around from the stable, and so he gives the order to someone who is subservient to him, and indeed in the second sentence we learn that that is the servant. Interestingly enough, his order is not understood by the servant. Okay, so that's one of the first quandaries that we're presented with here. Why is it that the servant does not understand? Is it that the servant does not speak the same language? Is it that the servant refuses to serve and does not understand because does not understand the address as being addressed to him? Is there some other problem of communication through language that's happening here? We don't know the language in which the order was given. We don't know precisely why the servant did not understand me. Of course, within a text like this, we can't really speculate on the internal life of the servant. We can't even speculate on the internal life of the narrator. They don't have internal lives, as it were. They're textual moments for us. So whatever evidence we use to interpret the parable has to be in some ways drawn from the parable, at least at the beginning. As we try to read the text, we can bring in other kinds of concerns, social, political, literary, from other places as we go, but it seems to me that what we first have to do is read it and know what it is we're reading. I myself went to the stable, so the I here, the narrating I, acts as the servant should have acted, or does the servant's job. I myself went to the stable, settled my horse, mounted. Okay, so without the assistance of the servant, he gets ready. But he gets ready for what? In the distance, I heard a bugle call, just another communication. There's a bugle call. sounding in the distance. I asked him, the servant, what this meant. Okay, so the I, who hears the bugle call, is also someone who's not understood the meaning of the sound. Right? The servant apparently didn't understand the order given to him, so the narrator says, and now the narrator, who's mounted his horse on his own, hears a bugle sound and asks the servant, who's apparently, not somebody who's got a reputation in this parable for understanding things. Okay? I mean, he hasn't yet established a reputation for understanding or interpreting anything yet. We weren't sure why he couldn't understand, but now we have a kind of second moment of not understanding this sound. I asked him what this meant. The servant here does not exactly reply in language. There's an attribution. He knew nothing. He knew nothing. Now, either the narrator assumes that he knew nothing. Pardon?
I was just, maybe I misunderstood something. Couldn't it be the horse that didn't understand the people?
I asked him what this meant. It could have been the horse.
Because he doesn't say the servant. Doesn't say the servant well with them.
Yeah, that's what.
Doesn't say the servant's anywhere related to this.
Well,
And then he hears the music.
yeah. Okay. So let's look over to the German. I'm going to try to handle this suggestion. I think it's an interesting. Sattelte mein Pferd und bestieg es. So that's a das Pferd. In der Ferne hörte ich eine Trompete blasen. Ich fragte him. So it would seem to be, if we look up further, der Diener, masculine. So if we track the pronouns, I'm pretty sure. Could ihn be the Pferd? No, I think not. Okay, one way to start, I like my start German. Okay. But it would have been a more fun parable. And what you have in mind is a more fantastic and lovely parable, and not out of the question for Kafka, because there are dogs who give academic lectures.
And the what is it, the doctor, the country doctor.
The country
Yeah,
doctor.
there's a conversation with the horse.
Listen, the mouse folk. There are many, there's a wonderful problem of the articulate animal in Kafka, so I appreciate your effort to make this interesting in a different way. Okay, so he knew nothing and had heard nothing. Now, we presume that's on the basis of that this is reported speech in some way, although our servant is still not speaking. The servant does seem to speak, though. Finally, at the gate, he stopped me. Ja. Beim Tor hielt mich auf. At the gate, by the gate, he stopped me, asking, "Where are you riding to, master?" Okay, so it's the first time the servant actually addresses him in language and reconstitutes the master position, which we thought maybe was in a little bit of a crisis, a few lines before. We weren't sure the master-servant was surviving this particular encounter, and now it seems to suddenly have reconstituted. I don't know. Ich weiß es nicht, sagte ich. Okay, again, he's narrating himself. He's narrating his own speech. He's reporting on his own speech. I don't know, I said, only away from here. And at this point we have three separate words, weg, von, here. So, only away from here. Let's remember at this moment that this parable is called das Ziel, right? For the goal, the destination. It's too bad it's not my destination. It would be different. There's an important equivocation. Is this my personal, or this I's personal destination, or is this a problem of the destination. It has a kind of generality and even applicability beyond this particular I, or maybe to any I, right? We don't yet know. So weg von hier. And then, interestingly enough, immerfort weg von hier, which is translated as always away from here. Only by doing so can I reach my destination. Okay, so there is a mein Ziel there. Nur so kann ich mein Ziel erreichen. And then, in the do form, which is interesting, because the master-servant thing isn't completely stable here. It's personal. And so you know your destination. Du kennst also dein Ziel, fragte Ja, yes, I answered. Didn't I say so? Actually, it's more of a declaration. Ich sagte es doch. I did say that. And then we get the production of a new noun form, weg von hier, which is hyphenated noun form, suggesting that it might be a place name, or a thing, a place, something substantial that could take a noun form, and this is an awkward kind of moment, because a term has been coined, say a noun has been coined, has been cobbled together and asserted, and then the I claims that is my destination. Weg von hier, das ist mein Ziel. Now, you might expect the servant to be a little confused by this place called Weg von hier. Could that place be any place, even though it's now being named through the hyphenated noun form as place? Like, what kind of place is that, the servant could say, or that seems very paradoxical, or could you find it on a map? And instead, the servant worries a little. You have no provisions with you, and it's esfochat, so you have no nourishment. You have nothing to eat to take with you. You have nothing that will nourish you along the way. And the I reports, I don't need any, I need none, ich brauche keinen, sagte ich. The journey is so long that I must die of hunger. It's an interesting use of the must. I must die of hunger. It's not like I run the risk of dying of hunger, or it's likely that I will die of hunger, or surely, certainly I will die of hunger. It's neither a proclamation of likelihood, nor really of certainty, but rather ich muss, which really is I have to. It's a necessity. It's an assertion of necessity. And it is necessary that I die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. And so we might ask, what form of necessity is this? And what is the I doing? What is the I saying? When the I says, I need no food, no nourishment, the journey is so long, that I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. It's a necessity that I die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. Now, if it's a necessity that I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way, why is it that I need none? I mean, why isn't it I need some because if I don't get food along the way, I will necessarily die. That's not what it says. I need none. I need none.
Even in the next line it says that even if he had some, no provisions could save him.
That's right.
Because he must stop along. This is
I need none from here.
I need none from here. He must stop along the way. Let's finish the next two lines, and then we'll really, I promise you, I'll open it. The journey is so lang, dass ich verhungern muss, wenn ich auf dem Weg nichts bekomme. No provisions can save me. No Essvorrat. Okay, but what's really important there? No food. Nothing to eat is going to save me. Which opens up the question whether something else might save him, but just not food or nourishment. No provisions of that kind, no Essvorrat. For it is, he says, fortunately, es ist ja zum Glück, luckily or happily, eine wahrhaft ungeheure Reise. Okay, so a truly, and then the word for immense is ungeheure, which is not only immense, but enormous, also overwhelming. It's a word that Kant uses when he's talking about the sublime. It's too much. It can even be monstrous. The ungeheuer. It has some implications of the uncanny in it, although not quite the same as unheimlich, but ungeheuer. So it is an immense, overwhelming, not quite fathomable journey. Reise. So, why is it fortunately a truly immense journey? And why is it that no provisions can save him?
Is away from here, is he trying to die?
Is he trying to die?
Yeah, is that the objective of where he's
Well,
is
Steve,
away from here?
yeah, weg von hier. It's
I think it's
it could be an interpretation, but weg von hier is a place that would be not this place. And it would have to be a place that's not another place either. Because if it were another place, it would have to be away from that place as well. At which point, it seems to be away from any specific place, anything that counts as a place within the language of place that we use, it would be away from. So it's a transport away from locality and place as we think of it. I'm not sure we can therefore say it's death, but let's hold that thought and ask whether there's kind of further warrant for that. So that's Steve and you are Paula.
Maybe it could be related to something like if you eat the provisions, I mean, you die because of intoxication, and if you don't eat, you starve. And well, then I will relate it to the nomadism with mind. When you are nomad, you cannot stay sedentary to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And well, to put it in more analogies, maybe it's what if you fool yourself with knowledge or something,
Yes.
you just stay stumped and you just don't go ahead. You just intoxicate yourself.
Huh.
And when you're hungry, you are just following something and this call of something.
Mm.
But you will die if you stay in that movement. movements,
Mm-hmm.
nomadic movements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Let me say something. First, this idea of Wegfrontier is used by Deleuze and Guattari in their book on Kafka to talk about deterritorialization. They use it as a concept of what it means to be involved in a process of deterritorialization, not this place, not that place, moving outside a bounded place and bounded territory, always. So they do identify it as a way of thinking about mobility. But there's a second part of what you're saying, and nomadism is clearly part of the Deleuzian vocabulary that gets taken up by people like Rosi Braidotti. But, the other thing that's of course interesting is the idea that starvation can be its own intoxication. So we have maybe a slight anorexic sublime. Right? The anorexic sublime.
The hunger artist.
The hunger artist. Hunger artist, okay. But one question I have is, I don't think we can assume that he gets provisions along the way. I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. No provisions can save me. I think if it's kein Essfahrrad, does that include the provisions that I might get now and bring with me? Or would it also include any provisions I might get on the way? And since I must die, there's some necessity of my death. It seems to me that no amount of eating could save me from my death. But even if we understood it that way, we still have to understand why this is fortunate. Why it's fortunate that it's a truly immense, ungeheuer journey. So it doesn't say it's infinite, but it's unfathomable. It's huge. It's larger than what can be it's the word Kant uses for what cannot be bounded by a concept. Right. Yes, please.
Before the fortunately, because I think that's actually really important, there is also the possibility of an allusion to some sort of spirituality where it's beyond him. It's not about food. If he's going to be saved,
Yes.
he says it really has nothing to do with, it's not material, it's not about bodily issues. So he's speaking about it in terms of, it's such a tricky thing. It's slippery here in terms of the language. So, but for me, I read a little bit of an allusion to spirituality because if I'll be saved, it has nothing to do with the food that I eat. It's got something else to, it's another journey, and it's not something I will be fed differently.
Yes.
So the provisions they have nothing to do with that.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak to this question of what might be spiritual or even theological at this moment in the text? Well, let's take Consenso first and then Zad.
Sure. I think I want to talk about something else first, but I want to respond to that. The whole time, as soon as you said deterritorialization, it opened a key for me because for some reason I couldn't articulate before I heard you say that word. I kept thinking of Simone Weil, who, in a strange way, like Kafka, inhabits a kind of threshold place in terms of her identity as Jewish or not. And I'm also thinking about your piece in the line, London Review of Books, and the attributions imposed on Kafka in terms of his language, his identity, his Jewishness. So Simone Weil consciously entered that space. She's considered a Christian mystic, although she came from a French Jewish family. And of course, she talks about this idea of se déraciner, to uproot oneself. And this notion of spirituality, of a different kind of journey, a little bit like what Paul was suggesting, all opened up for me as soon as you said the word deterritorialization. But can I go back to my other puzzle?
Yeah.
Among the many puzzles that you're opening for us and articulating, the one that I couldn't get beyond
There are
was,
many, but I can't.
and you'll have to help me with the German because I only know words in German, I don't really have it. When he says, with a certain tone that I impute to it, didn't I say so? Because there's a kind of self-evidence that is imputed in this translation at least. So since I'm reading it in English,
Yes.
this "didn't I say so" really stopped me short.
Mhm.
Because you were talking about this relationship, what is the relationship, and I caught the do, which is intimate. So
Mhm.
what kind of relationship is it? And this man is allowing himself to impute to the servant that he should have understood him. Didn't I say so? Or didn't you understand me?
Okay.
So this opened up many problems for me.
Yes.
Because Mary Douglas, an anthropologist, wrote a beautiful essay on self-evidence. And things, when self-evidence is imputed or demanded, it's never self-evident.
Yes, and
It's
that's true here.
imposed.
And that's true here.
So you use the word attribution, but it's beyond attribution, it's a demand. Like in the colloquial language, like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get
Well,
this?
okay, let me just say this about the translation. It's actually not a question. Okay, so in the English,
Yes.
they make it into a question. Didn't I say so?
It's
What's wrong with you?
Right.
In the German, it's simply ich sagte es doch. Now, doch is like, it's nothing but an emphatic.
Yeah, I
It's
said
like, I said that.
Mm.
Like we would say in English, we would say, I said that already, or but I said that,
Right.
right? But doch is like,
But that
emphasis.
strengthens my point about self-evidence.
Well, the whole point is that self-evidence has been crumbling surely but slowly throughout the parable, and this is a kind of, in my view, one of those kind of hilarious Kafka moments, right, where a speaker acts or proclaims something to be self-evident, which
But
is
it's clear
actually, I mean, it's unclear these folks are even communicated. Like, why did the one not even hear the other? And what's the status of language, and what's the status of the communicability of language here?
That's what was a pivoting point for me, because he demands it, and then almost consciously undoes it, untangles
Yes,
self-evidence.
and that's happened a couple of times now, right? Where something that should be clear and evident is not quite understandable. The bugle call, what does it mean? And even what might be understood is the conversation, the dialogic structure of this parable, it doesn't seem to follow exactly. Like, why is it when the I says, weg von here, away from here, that's my destination, the guy says, oh, you have no provisions. Understanding something about, just how far away weg von here might be, and worried perhaps a little bit. There's a kind of slight maternal figure, like, oh my God, take some food. You're not taking any food, you're going weg von here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I see that a number of you have.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to the spiritual theological, because I think we've got two issues here. One is the kind of breakdown of language that appears to be clear and obvious, right? Which is not quite communicating, and not communicating to us in a clear and obvious way, although the language is, you might say, very simple. You can, das Ziel, you can have that at the end of first year German.
Maybe I have a few thoughts that maybe can bridge the two, but it also stems from what you bring up, Vincenzo, between this inherent ambiguity in language, whether you look at it as speech or as text. So it's interesting to read a parable.
Yes.
For me, just the connotations that I have for a parable are that it's maybe originally part of some oral tradition that is passed down and then is somehow inscribed at some point.
Mhm.
Another connotation is also, of course, a biblical connotation of a code of conduct used through metaphors and associations. But
Yes.
specifically in this text, for me, when I look at the written of the German and then imagine listening to the heard of the German, you have a lot of confusions that come up around specifically back from here,
Uh-huh.
and with connotations that can bring up based on how you see it written and how you hear it spoken.
Yes.
And the main question that I have here is kind of this instability between the first time that he mentions weg von hier as just kind of, a description of, using a prepositional construction to describe kind of a location. And then the second time when he then emphasizes that I already said this and turns it, as you described, into a proper noun, a proper location, it becomes capitalized. So the word weg becomes capitalized. And in German, as far as I know, there is this subtle difference between weg as a preposition, which is pronounced weg, and then the capitalized weg, which is then a noun that means path.
Yeah.
Yes,
And so there is this ambiguity in just the written form of this.
that's correct.
There's no instruction on how he pronounces. Do you say, ich sagte es doch weg von hier, or weg von hier? So is he saying, the path from here, or away from here? And then this comes back, which is for me maybe the bridge towards a potential spirituality that is speaking here. In the sentence when he says that if I don't, that it's translated, I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. Now you have this construction here, this clause construction of the if, literally in the German it's if I on the way nothing receive or get. And it's possible for me to imagine that this capitalized weg, how it's been so stably assumed to just mean on the way, it could also perhaps be because auf has this prepositional instability as well. I mean, it can be like part of a motion, like on the way, or it can also be a location. So it can be on the away, perhaps. If you then look at this experiment that he's doing with using writing to create a new noun. So in a way, it could almost be as if, not that if I don't receive anything on the way, I must die of hunger, but if I don't receive anything when I'm at the away. Which then opens up kind of a spiritual world for me. Like
And I'm at the, so you're thinking of auf as at?
auf, like on. Like on as a fixed location. That's, auf den Berg.
But can't we accept that something is, I mean, I very much appreciate your taking us through it in that way, and it's really very helpful. It just makes me wonder whether we have to, whether we're actually being asked to choose which way to read, or whether what's happening is a condensation or a convergence of two incompatible or maybe dissonant kinds of readings at the textual site.
Absolutely, which then for me becomes a question of this difference between when we read it and the instruction for its reading to be spoken. So if you were to then, say this parable to someone, how would you pronounce these words?
Yes. But the question is whether you would only have to pronounce them one way.
Yeah.
And because there is no instruction,
Exactly.
right? Our master is not teaching us what we need to know. We're left to fumble exactly there, right? And so our fumbling becomes a textual necessity, right? And let's remember that not only are there moments of curious or failed communication within the parable, but the parable is also communicating to us, and most parables do have a didactic function, even if they don't fulfill them. Okay, we're going to think a little bit about the parable form in a while, but it's true that this is a text, and it's a text that contains dialogue within it and presents the dialogue as having taken place. So the other thing we have to remember textually is that this is something that has taken place. It is presented as a completed action in the past. And that also produces a problem for us, because he can say it is fortunately a truly immense journey, But at that moment, what is ungeheuer? I mean, what ends the parable is his statement. We never get any description of him actually leaving the gate. We never get a postcard from the journey. We have no idea whether the journey actually involves, or whether the journey commences, and whether it can involve moving from the place where he is. Because if Weg von hier is a place that would make sense in terms of any specific locality, how could he ride his horse from one place to another? He would still be bounded by locality. He would still be some place that is not away from here. He would be in a here. Right? Wherever he happened to be would be here.
It's the Sesame Street, the difference between here and there.
Well, but before Sesame Street, there was Hegel in the phenomenology. And in Hegel's phenomenology, he has a great discussion of the now and the then, and the here and the there, which you find again in Benveniste, right? In his history of Indo-European languages, where he talks about indexicals. And the big problem is that wherever here is, it's also somewhere else, because it's an inherently promiscuous term that refers indefinitely. And if you wanted to get Weg von hier, you couldn't go to another place that could be a here. You would have to go to some kind of place, and here the place would be in quotation marks, that would not be a localizable here. Okay. Now, these two things have happened. There's been not only a coinage of language, but an effort to produce something in language that opens up the possibility of thinking outside of established place, and I would say outside of established ways of understanding a journey, place to place, and even outside of an established temporal frame. Since could one actually arrive anywhere? And if one could not arrive at a place that could qualify as a here, right? Since the goal is Weg von hier, then either there is no arrival, non-arrival is the goal, or something is happening linguistically where the presumption that language refers to place is disrupted precisely by what we might understand as this poetic coinage, Weg von hier, an impossible, something that can be spoken or written. Actually, let's give it to you and say written, Weg von hier. It can be written, and it's only questionably speakable because we don't have the instruction. We don't understand our teacher. But something is being produced in language that is non-topographical, right? So I'm thinking here of something like the idea of a place name in Proust. It is a place, it is not a place. It is a place that's always being displaced, or that never quite localizes as a place, for different reasons than for Kafka. Yes, I'm sorry,
So, building on what everybody has been saying, I wonder if we could perhaps think of destination as a non-place or non-identified place, a place where you never arrive, potentially. And especially if we go towards the end, when he says it is fortunately a truly immense journey. Now, I don't know if I can have poetic license and think of immense as never-ending, but if you allow me for that for a second, the reason it would be fortunate, perhaps, is because that if it does end, you would fall back onto a here, onto something that is identifiable. it wouldn't be away from here anymore, because something that is away from here is, you can never identify as a here, because once you've identified it as a here, then it's been identified again. So in order to keep that non-place alive, and then I wonder if the food can serve as an analogy for a way. He says he doesn't need food. Well, could food serve as an analogy for a way, a means of traveling, a way of getting there? Now, of course, the moment you have a way of getting somewhere, it's become perhaps identified again. In other words, that might be the reason why he doesn't need food. Anyway.
Okay. I mean, maybe simply the kind of journey he's taking is not one that requires food. And if it did require food, it wouldn't be the kind of journey he's taking.
Mm.
Maybe that's one way to put it. Please.
Well, what I was going to say is, building on what Ashkan was saying in your earlier discussion of Deleuze, I think what attracts Deleuze and Guattari to Kafka so much is that they say that he puts language into play, he makes language stammer. It's a minor language for them in their terminology. And I think that this kind of breakdown of language, or this ambiguity in language, might be precisely the point. And we can maybe think of this, and I think it is important to, at some point, have a discussion of what a parable actually is.
Yeah.
Because I think that has a lot of relevance to
Yes.
how we read.
I think it's true. I think it's
things like
true.
Kafka. But I think this, I think his opening up of language is kind of the point here, and we can think of a journey through language, or the text as a place, and a text that's also a place away from here too.
Would there have to be, if we said that the text is a place, would there have to be an away from the text in order for this parable to continue to make sense? In other words, does this parable have to point away from itself?
In a way, I think so. And I think the text always has like an away from here almost. And it is to coin Deleuzian terminology, the virtual, the non-actualized possibilities of a text. That is maybe the away from here of a text.
I think actualization, though, is maybe one issue that we should keep in mind. Okay, I very much like the Deleuze and Guattari, but I think that there's some way in which the possibility of actualization is being contested, and I want to suggest that the reference to death and to dying of hunger is doing something slightly different in this text, since it is unclear whether dying of hunger, I must die of hunger. The journey is so long that I must die of hunger if, and thank you, by the way, Ashkan, for pointing out that next part. In the English it says, if I don't get anything on the way, but actually the German is more interesting. Wenn ich auf dem Weg nichts bekomme, right? But if on the way I receive nothing, okay, and nichts is interestingly, it's also one of those strange noun forms. So I'm going to be, right? I mean, like weg von hier, nichts. Ja, I'm going to receive nothing. But to receive, what does it mean to receive nothing? Can nothing be received? And if so, how do we read that? What form does that take?
Condemnation.
Sorry?
Condemnation?
Condemnation?
It's the uncanny approaching again.
It's the uncanny approaching again? Okay, wait, let's take you in the corner. Sorry. Tell me your name again.
Michael.
Michael, of course.
Yeah, I want to, along these lines, maybe take a bit of a U-turn because, as you pointed out, he never actually goes on the journey.
That's for sure.
And earlier in the piece, the bugle sounding is a kind of, well, it's a warning, a sounding alarm, but also indicates a kind of an attack. And that notion makes me want to read it as a kind of self-dialogue. In other words, the journey that he intends to go on is a way of leaving the house, whatever this house is. Let's understand it as his father's house, for example.
I don't know if there's even a house here.
Well, that's a good point, but the place, it's the homely place.
Do you think?
There's a stall.
Well, if it's potentially uncanny, like it's potentially canny as well.
Well, but okay, we could take what we know about Kafka and oh God, of course he wants to get out of his father's house. Make fun here, make fun here.
I wasn't talking about Kafka. I was speaking about the psychological framework where, to maybe overcome the father. And also
Yes.
you mentioned the authoritative voice that he warns himself with.
Yes.
The drive to overcome the father is the sort of ultimate betrayal, and it does indicate a kind
Okay.
of death.
It's true. But Mike, let me suggest this to you and tell me what you think. One feature of a parable, and parables have a history, right? I could give you a formal definition, but I think that's not so. It's not as interesting as understanding how parables get revised over time and take on different formal and functional features and dysfunctional features. But consider this: where are we? Right? When we start this parable, we've already vacated time and space as we know it. Right? I gave orders for my horse. It's like, well, who are you? You want to introduce yourself? No name. Where are you coming from? Is there another structure next to the stable? Did you walk out of the house to get to the... Nothing. We're in a way, we are deprived. Okay, let's think about deprivation, which is crucial to the ending of the parable. We're deprived of space and time as we know it. And we enter immediately into a narrative offered by a first person who has already from the start vacated time and place as we know it, right? Or the presupposition of which is that we don't ask, we don't know, we don't understand. We are already kind of fumbling, not misunderstanding servants in relation to the parable. So what did you say? I gave orders for my horse to be brought around from the stable. The servant did not understand me. Well, boyfriend, the servant's not the only one who's not understanding you. Who understands you? Who can understand you? Who are you? Where are you? Where'd you come from? No origin, no background, no context, no nice Thomas Mann introduction. It was a green day. It was not a beautiful Balzacian description of, what Paris looked like that day, starting, at 5 a.m. when the sun came up. No, we are already dislocated. So we might say we're already we are away from any here. Right? The parable commences. It not only commences on the presupposition that we're away from any here, but it delocalizes us. Right? It deprives us of space and time. We're already doing without a lot of our traditional supports. And we're going on some kind of journey here without a lot of nourishment. Right? We're living on very little. as we read. We're living on very little, and when we get to the end of the parable, have we arrived at something? It seems to me that the ungeheuer is a kind of opening of the enormous. I also almost want to say infinite, but I think that's to give a conceptual form to something that's actually resisting
Right.
a conceptual form. So maybe we have to allow the enormity of ungeheuer to kind of stand there. I don't want to too quickly turn this into an allegory, which would be, this is going to teach us about territorialization for our time, or there's a metaphysics we can draw from this, and then we will have used the parable and made it into true theory, and you will feel like you got your money's worth. I'm going to resist that just for a moment. By the way, there is no theory without the reading of theory. So anybody who wants to learn theory has to learn how to read. Okay, sorry. Didactic. You'll see. I have the didactic thing. I'm sorry, please.
I just have a question about the translation here. I keep getting drawn to this always away from here.
Yeah.
Only by doing so can I reach my destination. I'm
Yes.
not sure if this is in the German same way. But to me, this sort of represents some sort of familiarity and some repetition.
Okay.
And nomads.
So, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
The way I'm thinking about it, always away from here, as if it's happened before or it could happen again. When I go away from here, it's always away from here.
Okay, so does a German speaker want to talk about, first of all, the difference between immerfort and immer?
Is it more like more in relation to an immediately rather than for me the thought is like implementation now. And so the immer attached to it is like an immediate now.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, but of course what's really strange about the immediate now is that it's also carrying the always in it. Okay, so talk about a potentially theological moment. If the immediate now carries the always in it, and if the immense journey is fortunate, there's some kind of glück, some kind of luck or happiness that's being connected with this immense journey, which is not one that requires a fed body. We have to ask whether there's a kind of opening onto a certain kind of transcendent possibility at the same time that it's not understood as realizable.
This makes me think somehow about the tone of this unknown first person who begins his parable or the parable with the "I commanded," and then for me, this what you just said, in trying to seek out the instances in which this command or a form of commanding, giving orders keeps reappearing in the order for his horse to be brought, in the very self-assured I said where my destination was, what my goal was, in the thought, in his conceptualization of where the back from here is like immediately now. It makes me think, what I'm trying to think with this is that perhaps in a way the place weg von hier, this noun that is being made out of it, I'm also seeing it now as potentially a command in the way that in German you can also say like weg mit dir, like go away, like an abolition of here.
Yeah.
Like my goal is
Weg von hier.
is to get
Enough of here-ness.
enough of here.
Enough of here-ness already. I'm getting out of here.
But I was thinking the same thing, because even in English you can say I away, I away. I mean, it's a kind of archaic form, but you can say that. And my main point earlier was that the whole thing, even to state the I forcefully and give a command, is in my mind a kind of betrayal. And I think
A betrayal of...
I'm not sure, but that's why I put it into the psychoanalytical framework, the betrayal of the father or the mother, something like that, as a way of resisting the urge to make it purely spiritual.
Okay, let me just make one remark about this, and then I want to go back to Dara?
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure we answered your question. I just want to say this. The giving of the order, or the commandment, if we want to go theological for a moment, the first commandment, I gave an order, ich befahl, okay, mein Pferd aus dem Stall zu holen. I ordered we don't even know to whom at that moment the order is being given. I commanded that my horse be brought out of its stable. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay. By the second line, we see, the commandment has failed. Now we could say, this is a parable in which commandments do not work. Right? Or we can see already by the end of the second line that commandments depend on someone being able to understand them and receive them. Okay? Moses goes up, receives the commandments, comes down, doesn't like what he sees, smashes them, goes up again, receives them again. But there is this necessary moment of receiving the commandment. The commandment does not arrive unless it is received. Very interesting then to go back to the end of this. I must starve if I receive nothing along the way. And this receiving nothing is interesting, because receiving nothing actually becomes linked to this happy, lucky, enormous journey. Okay, so I think we're in a parabolic structure in which we're living with commandments that don't work, with communications that are not stable. There's some kind of babble going on here. Why is it that I don't understand what that bugle signifies? Now, if we as readers say, the bugle signifies an attack, or, we know about bugles. Bugles are a way of raising everybody, or whatever. We can have all kinds of very stable semantic associations with bugles. The question is whether those semantic associations are actually put into a certain kind of crisis in the parable, because here's the master who should certainly know what a bugle is signifying when it sounds, and he doesn't. And he asks his servant, do you know? Okay, in other words, we've lost the signification of the whatever the bugle signifies. It's been lost to whatever this linguistic predicament is, right? So even though we can from the outside bring in stabilized semantic forms, if we're to read this parable, we have to understand that some of the most basic things like communication, giving orders, understanding what a bugle signifies, are not functioning in a way that we can easily rely on. Okay, it's 11:21, and I know that I'm just going to take, without response, all of these questions going around this way, and then we'll break for Esfochat.
I just have a quick question. Can we understand that it's an inner dialogue, that he talks to himself?
You tell me. We would have to decide on the basis of the text itself, and it seems to me that that's a possible interpretation. I don't think the text gives us anything that would make it a conclusive interpretation.
Mhm.
But if I'm wrong, show me. Yeah, please, now.
I would
Is it-
like
yeah.
to point out shortly two aspects. First, to dwell a little on the theme of the journey, of taking out on a journey, which relates to the mystical aspects. You leave a place, leaving a place, dying, being reborn, leaving a place when it's no longer nourishes you, when you don't want to take nothing from this place and to go to someplace else. And being reminding the theme of the journey, that the theme is bigger than moving from one place to another. It's going on a journey. The journey as a theme is much bigger than commuting, than leaving one place and going to another. The other aspect I want to point out is a suggestion of reading the text, which I think that Kafka usually is consumed in theory, and I think there is a tendency to read it too seriously or too heavily, and I always try to read it and look for the sense of humor in it. Because I imagine Kafka reading it and people are laughing.
You don't think I made it funny?
I'm trying to make it funnier.
Okay, go ahead. I can handle that. I can
Okay.
handle it.
And I think we can imagine a situation while he's giving the order to the servant, and the servant saying to himself, "Well, again," and he's mounting his horse.
Oh, get your own damn horse.
Again he's mounting his horse, and he hears a call, no one else hears it. He doesn't leave, he wants to leave. And the servant, no one takes seriously this master that going on a horse and want to take to a journey. You have no provisions with you. Where are you going? And I think this reading is not stranger to Kafka. This kind of thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just a few quick things to mention, perhaps double back on later. There is a rabbinical tradition. You spoke about Moses coming down from Har Sinai. There's a biblical tradition where Moses is inarticulate. And it's one of the reasons he's puzzled, that he's chosen by his God to bring this message. He's an inarticulate person. And it's interesting that this master is not understood by his servant. Just a reflection. The second thing that comes to mind is talking about journeys. There's many journeys. It's very biblical, so there's many journeys. I think of Isaac on this journey to be slaughtered. The Antigone, the binding of Isaac, where he doesn't know, or does he? I mean, there's many rabbinical traditions. Rashi talks about it. Does he know? And is he really a boy? He's actually 37 in one tradition. So he's on this journey, which is known, unknown, very dangerous. He will not come back, or will he? There is a tradition in which Isaac is actually killed and revived by the angel, and the father once killed him a second time and stopped the second time, or stopped the second time he tries. The final illusion that's inescapable for me is coming on from the Christian tradition, the notion that God on the journey as the parable of life will provide. So you don't think about provisions. There are no provisions on this journey. God will provide. Just rapidly, Michel Foucault, in talking about the history of the hospital, traces it precisely to pilgrims on the journey who did not provide. And even if you did, the journey was so long, it wouldn't last more than a day or two or whatever. So other people had to provide for you. And the origin of the hospital, the hostel, is a place of hospitality for people on the pilgrimage, on the way to famous sites.
I know, I'm just not sure a guy is going anywhere.
You might not. But there's this notion that he's not going to think about it in advance, because neither the destination, well, he says the destination is clear, but you're not sure where you're going to go, how you're going to go, so you just abandon yourself to the destination.
Here's the thing, because he never gets out the gate, I mean, it's wonderful, all of these illusions. You're absolutely right. He's calling on these different illusions, but he's also doing something with them, and he's also remaking them so that there is no journey of the kind that we might expect. It's not like going up Mount Moriah or going up Mount Sinai or going up any of those mountains. No one's going up any mountains, right? And if there's no sign that there's a God who will provide. Oh, it's not like, hey, I don't need to take food because like God will provide. That's not what's said. I must die. In other words, no.
That's what I thought of Isaac. Because in one reading, Isaac knows he's going to die.
Okay.
That's the only authority that I can.
All right, but there's. Okay, understand. Okay, let's take the following. So please.
If he don't die, if he don't get it, if he don't get it, he must die desiring to get it, or something like that.
Desiring.
Like not like a desire, like an élan de vie or something, or
Okay.
élan to survive, or not exactly that.
It seems to me that there might be something other than
He don't
survival.
get it just on the journey. He must die of hunger, like of
Yeah,
on the road.
it's true, but it seems to me that we have to read it, I think, as luckily he must die. Luckily, happily, fortunately, he must die.
Yeah.
Because it is an ungeheuer journey. It's an enormous, overwhelming journey. So what is there about the ungeheuer which is different from physical survival?
But it's a happy.
It could be a kind of strange happiness, but one that is not reducible to self-preservation.
Yes, I know.
Okay. All right. So quickly here.
About self-preservation and,
Yeah.
and the thing that Darren said about inner thoughts, I can't help but thinking about Imada.
Imada.
Imada and the couple for da. That makes me think about a game like Freud's grandson playing with his real for da all the
Yes.
time. And it makes me think about this, like Freud's text Beyond the Pleasure Principle, which is also like the Derrida says, like taking a path, taking a step forward and then taking a step back all the time, because he never actually gets beyond the pleasure principle. Is
Yeah.
what Derrida says. But I think there's an element of game in it that I would like to. I haven't like really resolved it yet, but a play with himself. A play with himself that is perhaps going on. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the servant knows it.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
We don't know what
that's
we
exactly
don't
what
we
I was
don't
gonna say.
really know what the servant knows. The servant goes from being kind of unknowing to knowing something. But I'm not sure how much we can
He knew from the
attribute.
beginning that he's not going to take out for a journey. He knew from the beginning.
Maybe, but you see, you're making a coherent character out of a couple of lines, and I'm not sure it's a character. You know, it might be, but we would need textual support for that. I think. I don't know how knowing or unknowing, because even that, I mean, it seems to me that the servant is still a little stupid. He doesn't really understand what kind of journey this is. You have no provisions with you.
This is the point of view of the master.
That's the point of view of the master.
Of the servant.
That's true.
And the master he feels no one's understanding. No one hears the call.
No one. There's only one other in the entire world in this parable. There's only two figures. There is no broader social world. There's no family. There's no nothing.
There's an animal.
There's an animal. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, when I read it, it felt very, I guess, like childlike. When he says, if you stop me asking, where are you writing this? I don't know. The very next time he answers the question, he says, I just answered you. I just said, yes, I know where I'm going, away from here. Well, then you just said you don't know where you're going.
Uh-huh.
Right? And so that seems very uncertain, sort of childlike, and then very dramatic at the end. I must die of hunger. Like, I see the spiritual aspect of it, but it seems almost like what you all were saying, like a herald and modish sort of, like, oh, I must die, I cannot take provision. I mean, come on, you have to eat, right? Like, it seems very, he's like professing that this big thing, and it really doesn't, he already said he doesn't know where he's going, just away from here.
So you're taking the servant's point of view.
What do you mean?
The servant's point of view is like, well, you don't know where you're going. Away from here, it means you don't have a location in mind. The servant stands for location.
Right.
What, you're not going to take any food with you?
Right.
You need food. You're a located body in the world. And this guy's saying, you know what, there's some other kind of lucky ending to that located bodily being. And
yeah, and it could be seen as a pilgrimage, but it just doesn't read that way to me.
well, we're not going to Mecca. We're not going to
Right,
Jerusalem.
that's what I'm saying.
We're not going to Mecca or Jerusalem. We are going up. We're going away from locality and bodily need.
Right.
Right. So it's a transcendence of here-ness, locatedness, which also implies the body in location with its need to persist as a bodily being.
So we're going to celestial Jerusalem.
I don't think we're going to call it Jerusalem. And the reason we don't call it Jerusalem is because it's unspoken. It's unclear we're going anywhere. We might be going someplace within the here that is not locatable in the here. We might be going precisely to the end of the text and to the end of the narration. And then there's a cut. There's a cut. It ends there. It does not take narrative. It doesn't narrate a subsequent journey, right? So it's also the end of narration. This is where narration ends.
So he's staying.
He's staying and he's going, or it's over.
Or it will repeat itself.
Maybe, but we're at it. We want we want to make the again zone, right? We want to supplement this. And one of the things that the anorexic dimension of the parable creates for us as readers is the desire to fill it in, to expand it, to imagine it beyond itself, to give it context, to give it future. But actually, we're left with this. With this meager provision, or with nothing, right?
There is something also after he says, I don't get anything on the way, anything. It is not related to provisions, it's related to anything, and maybe it's related to the call he heard before. Like if he don't get the revelation of what was that call.
Well, that's interesting because in the German, the servant, like, it's the same word, just nothing, nothing. Like, he knew nothing, and he heard nothing.
Yes.
And then, back down here, is he receives
If I don't
nothing.
get anything.
If I receive nothing, I'm going to do it. If I receive nothing, yeah.
I like
It's
to
true.
argue about the call.
Let's hear from these two, and then I'm gonna let you have a tea or coffee break. But let's just go with this. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is, if we think in other psychoanalytic terms, there's this concept of the letter never arriving at its destination that I think is really relevant here, because it's like we have commandments that don't necessarily arrive at their destination. We have a journey that doesn't necessarily arrive at its destination, because we don't know whether he leaves, we don't know whether he actually goes anywhere, we don't know whether it's ever complete. So I know there's like different contexts of those terms, but I think that thinking about it in relation to that might be interesting.
Yeah,
because there is a satisfaction or a fulfillment just from writing maybe this.
Yes. I think we're going to look at a parable called The Imperial Message when we get back, and I think you'll probably see the link that you're trying to articulate here. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense that there's a level which is not related to space and time here. But I've been thinking about this Espohat, and I'm wondering if there's a way that a kind of social materiality might be coming back in here, because I'm not exactly sure about the etymology of the word Espohat in German, but for means before, right? And I think provision is a very felicitous translation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if it might mean that he can't bring anything with him in advance, and he can't take anything with him in advance. But then this line, where's this, where he says that I must starve when I get nothing along the way. I wonder if it means that he must receive this passive, get something from someone else. So there's kind of a need for the other or the others, you know?
Well, let's just, before we leave, let's just consider this. We're going to come back to this, and I appreciate your very engaged and intelligent reading of this. It's wonderful. I need no provisions. The journey is so long that I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. Suggesting that the journey is so long that is very long, such that I must die of hunger if I don't get anything on the way. So I need none to begin with. I need no provisions that I take with me. But do I need food along the way? He says no provisions can save me. No esfahat can save me. Now, it could be that for which where he's going, or what he's trying to do, what his destination is something for which there is no preparedness, right? That he's necessarily unprepared. Well, but no provisions can save me.
It doesn't exclude that he may receive some on the way.
It doesn't exclude that he may receive it on the way, but there seems to be a kind of wager. At the end, for it is fortunately, luckily, happily, a truly immense journey. What's missing logically is it's so immense that even if I were to get provisions along the way, I must die. But the second reading would be, it's so immense that no esfachat, in other words, no food could save me. No food will perpetuate me. And therefore I must die, luckily, fortunately. Okay, so we want to think psychoanalytically, what is this opening up of a certain kind of transcendence that is no place, that will not be the place of the body or the requirements of the body. Right? Something gets opened, but it's not the end of a journey. It's not a telos of a journey. It's not like going from this place to another place. It's going from this place to something that is no place and for which there is no language other than the language we can coin poetically to name the unnameable, to name what cannot be named within human language. So human language falters again, but it falters also at the moment of its poetic coinage, we might say. When we get back, I want us to think a little bit more about parable and whether there's a theological dimension that gets opened up in Kafka's parables only to get closed down at the same time. Right? It's opened up at the same time that it's cut short or turns out to be kind of impasse. Doesn't nullify the theological element exactly, but it makes it unusual, and it contests our expectations, right, about what actualization might be, about what arriving at a place might be, about arriving in another world might be. And I would even say, finally, even perhaps our ideas about the messianic. But we'll get there a little later.